streaming. Good morning, everyone. Still setting up. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Today is Friday, June 23rd, 2023, and it's our Mastermind Mastery Meeting, book review Fridays. Today, we're finishing our review of the book, Grit by Angela Duckworth. Last few weeks, we've covered the first 9 chapters. Today, we're covering chapter 10 and beyond, and hopefully we will be done today. Again, if you haven't read this book, I strongly suggest you read it. It is an amazing book. It is literally one of the best books you can lay your hands on, or in today's world where people do digital stuff, you can lay your eyes on via your Kindle or your phone or what have you. Anyway, chapter 10 talks about growing grit from outside in parenting for grit. Like, how do you raise children? Now, obviously, we run a business here, we're not childcare, but running a business full of volunteers is kind of similar to running a family where you have kids, because you have to instill in them the values and the ethos and the ethics and the what have you, and the discipline and the work behavior you want them to exemplify and manifest. So anyway, the book talks about opinions vary about how to raise children who are good at what they do. She talks about some psychologists, and she mentioned one named John Watson, who died in 1958, who said children should never be shown affection or given help if parents want them to become overachievers. So in other words, treat them with an iron hand, not kid gloves. Other people say passion and perseverance will be developed if parents show unconditional affection and support. Now, Duckworth says there isn't any scientific research about parenting and grit, but she has gathered some anecdotal evidence. So one of the people she got anecdotal evidence from was from Steve Young. For those who don't know, Steve Young is a football player, literally a legend in the game. He used to be a quarterback, I believe, for the San Francisco 49ers. Steve grew up in a strict household. However, in his household, no matter how tough things got, no matter how much he wanted to stop, his father never let him quit. Duckworth discovered that his family was also extremely supportive of their children and showered them with love, affection, and compassion. His father's name actually was LeGrand Grit Young. Grit was his nickname. And his father pushed him extremely hard because he knew that by pushing his son extremely hard, his son would succeed. And his son did succeed. His son, like I said, literally one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. I should also talk about a British comedian named Francesca Martinez. I don't know who that is, I'll be very honest with you, but she spoke about how Francesca grew up in a household that at first seemed to be very liberal and permissive, like anything could go, anything could happen, they could do whatever they want. Francesca's parents allowed her to drop out of high school at 16 and follow her dreams. And what was her dream? Her dream was acting on television. However, at the same time, even though her parents were liberal in letting her pursue her dreams, they were also firm, no-nonsense disciplinarians. They were firm, no-nonsense disciplinarians. So while they allowed her to pursue her dream, as long as she pursued it with discipline, her parents were okay with it. And so Duckworth basically says that both families are examples of how parents can be loving, but also tough. She refers to some graphic that refers, that shows the different types of parenting. And just like the cash flow quadrant, the graphic has 4 quadrants created by 2 lines. The horizontal line, which is this line that goes across, shows how demanding a parent is. It intersects with a vertical line that represents parental support. So the upper right quadrant is for parents who are demanding and supportive. She calls these parents wise parents. And she said these are the parents who are most likely to raise gritty children. So again, that's the upper right-hand quadrant, the top right, I guess. Authoritarian parents are in the lower right quadrant. They are demanding but unsupportive. Permissive parents, parents who allow their kids to do whatever, anything goes, are in the upper left quadrant. They are supportive but not demanding. And then the lower left quadrant is for parents who are both unsupportive and undemanding. These are neglectful parents. So again, if you were to draw the quadrant out, and I suggest everybody does, because everybody needs to understand how this works. Upper right-hand corner is what? Upper right-hand corner is parents who are supportive and demanding. So, hey, you need to get this done, but we will give you all the support you need to do it. Upper right-hand corner. They are the parents who are most likely to raise successful children. Lower right-hand corner are parents who are like, you need to get this done, go figure it out. Don't ask me for anything, just go get it done. Permissive parents are in the upper left corner. Hey, listen, what do you want to do? You want to do it? Great, I support you. But I'm not going to give you standards. I'm not going to give you expectations. Lower left, again, is for unsupportive and undemanding parents. It's like parents who are like, do whatever you want. So again, those are the 4 quadrants. So again, the reason I'm telling you what these 4 quadrants are is, as leaders, you guys have to figure out which of the quadrants you want to be in when it comes to leading your teams. Are you going to be supportive and demanding? Are you going to be demanding but unsupportive? Are you going to be permissible or permissive, which is supportive but not demanding? Or are you going to be unsupportive and undemanding? So like if it comes to teammates, an example is, these are your expectations, this is what you need to do, let me educate you, let me equip you, and so on and so forth. That's the upper right-hand corner. If the second corner is the second, which is the lower right corner, the lower right quadrant, is demanding but unsupportive, which is you need to go do these numbers, you need to go do this, that, the other, and the third, go figure it out. When you put the numbers on the books, good for you. Then the next one again is, and I'm speaking of it in terms of this business, lower left is unsupportive and undemanding, which is, hey, you're in my business, I'm happy you're here, do what you like. And again, upper left is people who are supportive. Hey, listen, you want to win here? That's wonderful. Whatever you want to do, you have my support. I'll provide you with training. I'll do what you want. But again, I'm not going to do anything extraordinary to, hold you to higher standards. So anyway, many parenting studies indicate that children raised by parents who are in the upper right-hand corner have higher grades, are more self-reliant, and are less likely to suffer from anxiety and depression. And think of it this way, and this is very similar to the business. In her book, she talks about all young children imitate the adults in their lives. Children of wise parents also emulate or try to equal or surpass their parents' behavior and interests. Wise parents' interest and enthusiasm rubs off on the children, who often strive to excel at the same things. If wise parents model grittiness, their children are likely to develop grit too. So think of it from the context of this business. New teammates, if we're to look at it from this business, new teammates are likely to imitate whom? New teammates are likely to imitate their leaders, whomever their leader is. Young or new teammates are likely to imitate them. So if you are focused and you're disciplined, Your teammates are going to, I mean, those who are winners, I'm not talking of those who are just passing by. They're going to try and be like you. They're going to try and, equal or surpass your behavior and your interests. If you're enthusiastic about the business, if you're interested in the business, it's going to rub off on the people you're leading. Some people are just visiting, guys. No matter how enthusiastic or whatever you are, nothing will happen to them. But you will find those people who will latch onto that and keep going. Art Williams started the company with 7 people, not 700 people. So again, if you model grittiness, the people you lead, you're going to find people who model that too. And why? Because ultimately, you are a role model. You are a role model. Everybody you bring into your business, you are their senior business partner. So you're a role model for them. And the thing to remember, just like with children, parents aren't the only role models that children have. Kids have teachers, coaches, and other mentors, people who are psychologically wise and are able to help children and young adults develop grit. Same thing in this business. You are not the only person. There are people who also in the business, they can emulate, but the primary person needs to be you. Why? Because you are the leader. So moving on to chapter 11, growing grit from the outside. Chapter 10 was about parenting. Chapter 11 is about growing grit from the outside. So there is very little scientific research about the impact that extracurricular activities have on children and teens. And that's because, for the most part, scientists can't force children to do what? Can't force children to do or abstain from certain activities. You can't force a child you can, but it's not ethical, I would like to think, to go do experiments. Nevertheless, the author believes activities outside of school are important. Children thrive when they spend part of their week doing hard things that interest them. Children thrive when they spend part of their week doing hard things that interest them. Appropriate, for lack of a better term, appropriate grit building activities are things that are interesting and hard. They're interesting, but they're hard. While texting friends may be interesting, it isn't hard. While surfing the internet, TikTok, Instagram, whatever is interesting, it isn't hard. School can be hard, but it's not always interesting. Activities such as ballet, band, drama, athletics can be interesting and hard. Now, let's look at it let's again tie it back to this business. Let's look at social media. I don't do social media. I don't like social media. It's a chore for me. It's hard. It's not interesting. It can be interesting if I'm doing it to make money, if I'm doing it to do business. But because it's interesting and hard, but I know where I'm going with it, I'm able to do it. So for example, we spoke about certain social media initiatives. I have been faithful to that mandate because I find it interesting, and not the social media input, the social media output. And that's why I get it done. So that, again, if something is hard and interesting, you're likely to succeed. Anyway, the research that is available, according to her, concludes that children who do activities outside of school earn better grades, have higher self-esteem, and have overall better behavior than children who don't. She also says that children who have the former are more successful as adults. So children who did activities outside of school ended up having more success as adults. Columbia University did a study, and it found that teenagers who spend more than a year engaged in the same activity are more likely to graduate from college. I didn't know that. So if you were a child, or a teenager rather, and you did, like, let's say drama club every year, or you did for over a year, or you did 4-H, which is for people in the Midwest who know that's farming or what have you, for more than a year, you're more likely to graduate from college. Those who do the same activity for more than 2 years are more likely than others to have a job after college graduation and on average earn more money. So again, what's she trying to say here? She is saying that if you want to be successful, you have to be consistent, because that success, so consistency gives you momentum. In 1978, the Personal Qualities Project aimed to find out which personality qualities determine whether a person will be successful or not. The director of the project, Warren Willingham, and his team concluded that students who were involved in 2 high school activities for more than 2 years and improved or advanced during that time, for example, were elected to club office or won an award, were more likely to graduate from college with academic honors and hold elected leadership positions later in life. He said the reason for that is that these students had a lot of follow through. Follow through, guys, that's a word you need to write down. And I'm looking, I only see Martin's camera on. Everybody else's camera isn't on, so only God knows what you're doing. I don't know if you guys are sleeping. I don't know if you guys are on the toilet. I don't know if you're walking the streets, but I'll say it again, guys, have your cameras on. I can't keep on saying the same thing. We're all adults here, but it is what it is. Thank you, Martin. Anyway, Duckworth says that, well, actually, let me move back. Let me go back a bit. Duckworth tried to replicate Willingham's results with a survey of 1,200 high school seniors. Grade points were assigned for how long students participated in an activity or whether they had earned awards for leadership or leadership positions. Duckworth and her team checked in with students 2 years later. They determined that the students' level of grit correlated to whether or not they were still in college. Duckworth says that following through on our commitments both requires grit and at the same time builds it. Again, why am I talking of cameras on? Because it's about having that grit. Your commitment should be, I'll have my camera on. I am a leader. If you are leading people and you're having a meeting and their cameras are on, you will think that the person you're talking to is extremely unserious. That's reality. That's reality, but you cannot expect the people you're leading to do the things you don't want to do. I don't want to do a 10:30 a.m. Zoom every Monday through Friday for you guys. I would rather be asleep. I'd rather be at the park. I would rather be in Hawaii. But I do it because that is my commitment. Your commitment is very simple. Your commitment isn't to be here and talk. Your commitment isn't to be here prepared. Your commitment is simply to be here, have your camera on and take notes. But if you don't do it, guess who is hurting? Definitely not me. So it's the same thing. To follow through on commitment, you need to have grit, because when you do that, you excel more than people who don't follow through on their commitments. Anyway, Duckworth speculates that children who quit when faced with failure will enter a corresponsive cycle and quit things over and over again. In other words, quitting is a learned behavior. Conversely, children who persevere are more likely to do so again in the future, even as tasks get harder. When you force yourself to do the things you don't like to do, what will end up happening is you will continue building on that. You will continue doing things you don't want to do. And eventually you'll discover that those things are like second nature. So she also talks about how children from well-to-do families have more opportunities for extracurricular activities than children from families living in poverty. And she said that's one of the reasons that poor children are unable to develop as much grit as people from successful homes. In other words, they are less likely to win long term. They are more likely to be average and ordinary than they are to be extraordinary. Experiments conduct, and this is an interesting part of the chapter. If you guys read it, you'll see what I mean. Experiments conducted on rats and children have confirmed that people and animals can learn to connect hard work with rewards. Let me say that again. They've conducted experiments on rats and they've conducted experiments on children. That's the funny joke anyway. Not at the same time, obviously, two separate experiments. But the bottom line is, people who have gone through stuff have learned to connect hard work with rewards. Those who have taken on and persevered through difficult tasks are more likely to put more effort into easy tasks than those who never overcame challenges. University of Houston psychology professor Robert Eisenberger calls this learned industriousness. If there is another word another term you should write from today's session, it should be learned industriousness. If you can learn industriousness, and that's one thing I've seen in my 18 years here, many people refuse to learn that, but you can. So anyway, Duckworth's family has what they call the hard thing rule. Every member of the family gets to choose their hard thing, which is something exciting that requires daily deliberate practice. They can quit at a logical exit point. For example, at the end of the season or before another tuition payment, but not before. So one of her daughters went through 6 hard things before she found the one she loved. When her daughters got to high school, they will have to commit to their hard thing for at least 2 years. So they try this hard thing for at least a semester, what have you. When they get to high school, they have to commit to it for 2 years. And she recommends the hard thing rule for every family wanting to encourage grit in their children. And again, guys, that's what I'm trying, and I'll say this for the umpteenth time. That's what I'm trying to get you guys to do. Having your camera on is a test. Having your camera on is a test. It's not a hard test. It's just a test. But if you are not ready to overcome that challenge, to overcome that test, you are not ready to overcome bigger tests. Little things, you can learn industriousness. What are the little things I need to do? Little, tiny, minuscule things. They all add up. They all add up. And before you know it, you have a huge snowball of great things happening in your life. Anyway, let's move on to chapter 12. Chapter 12, she talks about grit within a cultural perspective. And she defines culture as the shared norms and values of a group of people. A culture's boundaries are psychological, not physical. So for example, a football team has its own culture. A basketball team has its own culture. A school has its own culture. Teams within Primerica, for example, have their own culture. People form alliances, people have allegiances to their cultures. And she says, if you want to be grittier, you should join a culture that emphasizes grit. Leaders who want their employees or group members to be grittier should create a gritty culture. That's what I try to have here, but hey. Dan Chambliss, the psychologist who studies professional swimmers, echoes this. He says, the real way to become a great swimmer is to join a great team. New team members conform to the team's standards of hard work and self-discipline, which makes them even better swimmers. What I've been saying all along, guys, again, goes back to something as simple as having cameras on. If you have a culture here of having your cameras on, new people who come in will also have their cameras on. And I'm just picking on cameras today because I want you guys to understand how the little things make a big difference. So anyway, over time, a culture's standards and values become a part of each member's identity. How members view themselves dictates their choices. If you see yourself, for example, in this business as a great prospector, well, you're going to prospect. If you see yourself as a great closer, you'll close. If you see yourself as a great whatever, you'll do that. If on the other hand, you see yourself as a hopeless whatever, you'll be hopeless. If you see yourself as a useless whatever, you'll be useless. So for example, she talks about Finland, the country. She says people from Finland view themselves as greater than other people. Their culture teaches them to value sisu. And there's actually a movie called Sisu, which you need to watch if it's very good. And she says sisu is basically the inner strength of perseverance. She hypothesizes that because Finns think of themselves as being able to overcome anything, they're more capable of doing so than people from other culture. This behavior confirms their self-conception. Facts. So several companies, including JP Morgan, also foster cultures of grit. So do sports teams, such as the women's soccer team at the University of North Carolina and the Seattle Seahawks football team. The West Point Military Academy at West Point, which is just upstate New York, has shifted its culture over the past several decades. In the 1970s, 12% of cadets quit before the end of Beast Barracks. We spoke about Beast Barracks last week. In the early 2000s, 6% quit. And in 2015, only 2% quit. Lieutenant General Robert Caslin, who was the superintendent of West Point when Grit was published, says that because the school has adopted a developmental model of leadership, instead of using fear to push cadets, instructors lead from the front by training alongside their charges until they can do things on their own. They also use positive encouragement instead of negative feedback. Pete Carroll, the coach of the Seattle Seahawks, when this book was written, is obsessed with grit and has created a culture of grit for the entire Seahawks family, from the players to the coaches to the front office staff. The Seahawks focus is best summed up by the word competition. In Latin, compete means strive together. Everyone in the Seahawks family works together to push beyond what they did yesterday to be better tomorrow. The team culture also emphasizes finishing strong, which means consistently focusing and doing your absolute best at every moment from start to finish. You have to ask yourself, do I do my absolute best at every moment from start to finish? If the answer is no, then you've got to change that. All right, so key takeaways from the book. She ends the book with a few closing thoughts. The first is that grit can be grown from the inside out by developing interests, daily practice, and finding a purpose beyond oneself. It can also be grown from the outside through the influence of people. People who are grittier are also more emotionally fulfilled. They are happier. She admits that no one has yet studied how a person's grit impacts other people in their lives. So if you're a hard ass, for lack of a better term, does that make people around you? Nobody has studied that. She said there is no such thing as having too much grit, but she warns that there is no use in finishing everything you start if you don't have a passion for it. It's okay to leave old interests behind in pursuit of others. Goodness, honesty, integrity, and kindness is just as important as grit. While grit positively impacts academic and professional achievement, moral character affects how people function in and navigate society. They are both important. She says that some critics say encouraging children to be gritty makes them think they'll be superstars. She said this isn't necessarily true, and she doesn't see any harm in encouraging children to persevere through adversity. To her, teaching young people to be gritty helps them figure out and become deeply invested in their interest. She offers American writer Ta-Nehisi Coates as her final example of grit. A 2015 MacArthur Genius Grant Award winner, Coates says that failure is the most important factor in all of his work. Everything he has ever written started out terrible, but was slowly refined with daily work. Every other paragon of grit Duckworth has interviewed tells similar stories about their road to success. Duckworth isn't the kind of genius her father talked about. She now views genius as working towards excellence, ceaselessly with every element of one's being. She considers herself a genius and thinks anyone willing to put the work can be one as well. So that is the book. I know that many of you, if not most of you, have not read the book. I will still suggest that you go read it. Even though we're done reviewing the book, I still suggest you go read it. So next week, we are going to read, not next week, we're going to review, and I suggest you read this book. This book that we're going to read is a very simple read. It's not that long, it's not that complicated, and it's literally, in my opinion, one of the best books you can ever read. It's actually one of my favorite books of all time. And it's a book called The Alchemist by, and I'll share my screen. It's a book called The Alchemist by Pablo Coelho. Here, let me share my screen 1 second. Please go get this book. Once you get this book, please read the book, please. Don't give yourself excuses. It's not a difficult book to read. It's not a difficult book to digest. It's not a difficult book to understand. And if for whatever reason you cannot read the book, go to Amazon and do the audiobook. I don't do audiobooks, I read the old-fashioned way, but this is the book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Again, it is not a complicated read. And it's not a long read either. This book, and I wish I had my paper copy. I don't, I just have a digital copy. But this book has, let me see how many pages. This book, by the way, it's $4.99 on Kindle. It's free. If you can look for it wherever else. But it's got I don't tell you how many pages. Well, the page was here somewhere. Anyway, people, go read the book. Let's have a healthy discussion next week. The book review Fridays the goal of book review Fridays is for us to talk, not for me to lecture. So please read the book so we can have a discussion. All right, everybody, God bless Team Alpha. God bless you. And of course,